check. Yes, everything works. We're still waiting on the final speaker, but she will be here in a couple of minutes. She's also the last speaker, so we'll wait a little bit. And in the meantime, we'll just start the what's now become the yearly Oscar Awards. And we're very glad to welcome you all again in the SPY 525. And I have to say, it's always so delightful to see so many open science enthusiasts who last year would rather stay inside because of the storm outside and now come inside despite the nice weather. Yes, so we have a busy program in store for you. The walk-in we had now opening words. I don't know why my name is behind that, but it's fine. We're here today to basically celebrate open science, specifically, of course, in Amsterdam. And we do this with a lively discussion. First, the speakers of this discussion will present. We had the theme, which is, I think, very relevant to today, trust in science. And we had a varied amount of, or a varied panel that we chose. And I think we're in for very interesting presentations and discussions. I'm looking forward to it a lot. And then after this panel discussion that you can also contribute in, by the way, we have the actual Oscar Awards. And I have to say, every year it's also a delight to see all the projects being sent in and to really see what's happening in Amsterdam. It's always a little bit difficult to choose the winners. But I think this year, again, the winners really deserve to stand here, to be celebrated, and to get the Oscar Award. So without any further ado, I would like to ask the first speaker, Dr. Bojana Vekelov, who's an expert in science skepticism, to come on the stage and present her views on this topic.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Bojana Vekelov. Can you hear me, actually? Yeah, I'm going to stand here. I'm currently a postdoctoral researcher at the FU. Before that, I did my PhD in social psychology at the UvA on the topic of science skepticism, more specifically how we can overcome it. And in that regard, we looked at something called psychological distance to science, which I will get to in a bit, science skepticism, and today I will also, at the end of the talk, reflect a little bit what this body of research on the precursors of science skepticism from our psychological perspective, what it means for open science. So if we look at really a large body of public surveys, surveying public opinion, we can see that on average 9 in 10 people agree with this statement. They say, I trust science. And this is really true across many different countries, across many different continents, on representative samples. So if we just look at this piece of information, it seems quite positive, right? So 9 in 10 people believe in or trust science. This is, I think, maybe the highest societal institution in terms of the trust it gets from the public, at least when it's looked at from this high level. However, I think you're suspecting that this is not the full story. And I think this is well illustrated by the fact that, so this is from a survey done in like 10 countries all over the world, representative samples. The same people say, so I don't know what happened with this figure, but 4 in 10 of the same people say that they only trust science that aligns with their personal beliefs. So this is not how science works, unfortunately. And I would like to also say, like, these are the people who are willing to kind of like say that to a surveyor, right? So I think a lot more are susceptible to these biases to a lesser or a larger extent, right? We should not think we are exempt from biases like this. So this is precisely the science skepticism that I've studied, skepticism in publicly contested domains. So by science skepticism, we mean kind of the unwarranted and systematic rejection of science and scientific findings in specific fields. This skepticism can be quite consequential, not only for undermining public trust in science as an important institution, but also for some really consequential outcomes outside of that. So, for example, climate inaction, vaccination uptake. There are also other examples, but these two are like the most prominent ones. And what we know so far about why people reject scientific findings in such domains is that, well, actually the reasons are quite heterogeneous. They really depend on the domain we're talking about. So if we look at climate change, the most consistent and most reliable predictor of public skepticism is political orientation, right? So I don't think that comes as a surprise, especially in Western countries. So people who are more conservative, more on the right, tend to believe less in climate science or believe that climate change is real. If we move to vaccination, especially childhood vaccination, it's less about political ideology and more about religious and spiritual worldviews. So people who are more religious and more spiritual tend to reject vaccine science more. And also people who are lower on science literacy. So by science literacy, we mean like a quiz kind of, I would say, high school level science knowledge. Like, for example, you have a statement, electrons are smaller than atoms, right? And then is this true or false? We have a test, a battery of these items, and this kind of predicts vaccination skepticism. If we move on to yet another contested domain, genetically modified foods, which is actually the domain in which we see the most sort of widespread skepticism in our samples, it's less about any of the worldview variables like political or religious ideology and more about the lack of science literacy. So this is just to illustrate that we know quite well so far why people reject these science in these publicly contested domains. Like, we can describe people who are more likely to reject science in these domains quite well. However, the predictors of science skepticism that we focused on so far are quite domain specific, so they are mostly relevant or predominantly relevant for one domain. They don't really translate that well to other domains, and they are difficult to change. So if we look at ideological and worldview variables, they are very resistant to change. If we look at science literacy, of course, it's attainable to increase science literacy, but at scale, it is also a challenge. So now I'm getting back to psychological distance to science. So with this work, we wanted to identify one or more precursors of science skepticism that would be relevant across different contested domains and that would potentially be changeable, that we could use in science communication. So we started from this broad concept of psychological distance. So basically, this just describes the fact that people perceive different objects, events, or concepts as more or less psychologically close to them or distant from them. And to make it a bit less abstract, they do so along four main dimensions of psychological distance. So spatial dimension, how far away is something from me versus how close is it in like space. Temporal distance, so does something concern the present moment or the distant future, for example. Social distance, does something concern me or people like me, people close to me, or on the other hand, people I have nothing to do with. And hypothetical distance refers to the uncertainty surrounding an object or event, so how likely or not is something to happen. And it's important also to note that these are interrelated, so if we perceive something to be further away in space, we're also going to perceive it as less likely, for example. Okay, so what does this have to do with public perceptions of science? So getting back to that, we argue that lower psychological distance to science, so the flip side, so psychological proximity to science, would entail that science and scientific research is perceived as like a tangible undertaking, as something concrete that has effects that are relevant to the individual. So this means that science is perceived as visible in the local community in the present moment, that it's dealing with the present time, that it's seen as something producing like reliable and applicable insights to the real world, and that scientists are perceived as accessible and similar to oneself. And so our main sort of guiding rationale would be that if people perceive science like this, they are less likely to be skeptical of different scientific findings in publicly contested domains. So we did just that. We basically constructed a psychometrically validated scale to measure these types of perceptions. And we found that higher psychological distance to science, we call it SciDisc for shorter, predicts higher science skepticism across different domains. So that included climate change, vaccination, evolution, and 2 types of genetic modification in humans and in food. And this was true when we accounted for different demographic, ideological, and knowledge predictors that are known to be associated with science skepticism. So in general, people who perceive science as like a distant endeavor that has little to do with them are more likely to reject scientific findings in a lot of these contested domains. But we wanted to see if we can use this actually in science communication. So that was our next step. And we predicted that presenting science in a specific domain as close versus distant will reduce science skepticism in that domain, and for that we did like survey experiments. You don't have to read this. It's just to show that basically we had like a science communication vignette that was otherwise the same. We just varied references to different distance dimensions that I just showed you. You can see them here a bit better. So this study was done in the UK, or studies actually, and we said that the science was being conducted in the UK versus Japan, that these techniques are currently being applied versus by 2040, that scientists are engaging with people like you in discussions versus mainly with fellow scientists, and that scientists know versus hope that these changes can be made accurately. It was about nanotechnology or genetic modification in the food domain. And what we found is that psychologically close framing reduces science skepticism and increases positivity towards the science. So I'm not sure how well this is visible here, but we can see here that the valence, so attitude positivity towards the science that we communicated, was higher in the closed condition. People also perceived the science to be more credible in the closed condition, and skepticism towards the entire field. So it generalized not only to the findings in the vignette, but to the entire field of genetic modification or nanotechnology. So the skepticism was lower in the closed condition versus the distant one. So not to get into a lot of specifics here, but we just wanted to get at the reasons why this might be happening. This happens in part because psychologically close science is perceived as more personally relevant. People feel like it has something to do with their lives and it's consequential, and that reduces skepticism and increases attitude positivity. So this is part of the process that is happening behind these results. So to sum up, psychological distance to science consistently predicts skepticism in publicly contested domains. So the higher distance to science, the higher the skepticism. And within a domain, psychological closeness as opposed to distance increases attitude positivity towards and credibility of scientific information, and reduces skepticism in that field. Personal relevance, perceived personal relevance of science is part why this happens. So closer science is deemed to be more personally relevant, which has positive effects for how we judge the science. So it seems that psychological distance to science seems to be acting like a trust cue or a trust heuristic, like a shortcut that people are using, that could be incorporated in science communication. Of course, when possible, we are not advocating for making up psychologically close facts about domain or a specific finding, but when possible, we do recommend to focus on the more psychologically close aspects of the science in question. And I just briefly put some thoughts here about how this line of work related not only to psychological distance to science, but more broadly science skepticism relates to open science principles and practices. So the research on how the public perceives open science is quite in a preliminary stage. People are engaging with it more, but there's still a lot of work to be done. So I think it's safe to say that the effects on the public, how the public perceives open science, depends on the specific open science practice or principle that is being communicated, and on the outcomes we are focusing. Are we focusing on how people perceive scientists versus science? I think like one overarching like philosophical value that is related to the open science movement is intellectual humility. So acknowledging the limits of our findings and showing openness to updating our views. So this has been shown to be really, if scientists signal intellectual humility, this has very positive effects towards how people judge them and the science. I think also another fairly non-controversial part of open science is like sharing whatever, like data, materials, code, publishing open access, making science accessible, reducing the distance. It acts as a positive signal. It signals that we have nothing to hide, or that scientists have nothing to hide, and that we care about making the science accessible. It's a different story when that sharing results in finding out some inconsistencies or things like that, but as just a signal, it is perceived positively. I think something that is more of a mixed bag in terms of public perceptions are replications, especially if they fail, because obviously they can reduce credibility in the finding that was not replicated, which is great, but it can also overgeneralize to perceiving the scientists as less credible and the entire field, and this might be more difficult to correct afterwards. So it's something to keep in mind, and in general, this space, I think, has a lot of opportunities for figuring out how best to communicate what we're doing here with open science, how to best communicate it to the public and how to make sure that it's perceived in the right way. Just briefly thank my collaborators on this, including my supervisors, Frank and Bastian, and thanks for your attention.
Well, great talk to start off with. I'm already having some additional questions for the panel discussion. But on to the next speaker, Menno van den Bos, who I'd like to introduce and ask to come up, who is a freelance journalist and actually studied anthropology as well, and currently writes a lot of pieces also for the NRC about specifically the topic trust in science. So I think an ideal speaker to take the stage next. Warm applause, please.
How does this work? Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Menno, and I am possibly the only non-scientist here, non-academic. I'm a journalist, as Niels said. And I was asked here today to, can you guys hear me if I'm standing here as well, or should I? Okay, I should stand here. Oh, there's a live stream. That's added pressure. Anyway, I was asked here to give my take on trust in science from a journalism perspective. So before I do that, I should probably say what my perspective is, what I do as a journalist. like Neil said, I also studied anthropology. I now work as a freelance journalist. I write mostly. I do this for NRC, which is a national newspaper here, and for my own Substack blog/newsletter called The Hype is Real. It is in Dutch, I'm afraid. As some of you might know, you don't earn a lot of money writing, so I kind of sustain my writing work with a part-time job as an editor at a financial newspaper, editing other people's work before it goes to print. When I am writing, though, I specialize in misinformation. I prefer that term over disinformation. That's a whole other story. And media hype. When I say hype, I mean when a certain topic, a certain narrative gets disproportionate amount of media attention, when actually not that much is actually going on. And these two things often go together, hype and misinformation. Media hypes are often sustained by misinformation because if we would stick to the facts, the hype would collapse, right? It needs misinformation to stay alive. Some examples of my work that I've done recently. By the way, this includes scientific misinformation as well. Science from like the fringes of academia, for example, bad junk climate science or junk pseudoscience on a biological race, going against the scientific consensus that there is no such thing as that. This is, to me, something very interesting because people might say they trust science, but do they trust the right science? Some examples of my recent work. Lately, I've been doing a lot of stuff about AI, which is no surprise because it's like one of the biggest media hypes of today. My most recent story was about voice cloning in the bottom right corner, which has gotten a lot of media attention, but there's not actually a lot of proof that it's happening. People are supposedly being called by friends and family, and it turns out not to be that person, but a clone. Again, a disproportionate amount of attention for something that is hardly or not happening at all. I could talk for hours about wild ghost stories about AI, but maybe during drinks after. And to debunk all these stories, these narratives, I talk a lot to academics, to scientists. So it's safe to say I couldn't do my work without you guys and a lot of your colleagues. They provide me with ammunition to debunk those stories, to put things into perspective. I really believe in the cooperation of journalism and science. We even share the same struggles. The rise of the radical right threatening our professions, generating funding for our work. And even sometimes we share the same misunderstandings. It is often assumed that trust in journalism is on the decline as well as in science. I don't know, I'm getting insecure because Bojana is here and she probably knows a lot more about this, but at least in the Netherlands, the numbers don't actually reflect a steep decline. It kind of goes like this. Oh, okay. Am I saying this right? Okay, yeah. So don't be too depressed about that, is what I would say. But we have to live up to that trust that people do have and make it even better, of course. And sometimes, so I counter bad journalism with the help of science, right? But sometimes science is not helping. For example, when academics are contradicting each other. This is a nasty habit that you guys have. Some of you even like this. You have different schools of thought, and it can confuse the public and even journalists, like who is right, which scientific camp is right. Misinformation is one area where there is a bit of an academic rift going on, with some academics saying it's actually exaggerated as a problem, which I tend to agree with, and other academics saying, no, it's actually underestimated. Very interesting. Academics veering out of their own expertise, also an annoying habit that some academics have. Most of them stick to their own expertise. Great. But some of them get a lot of attention for doing wild claims about things that are not actually in their domain, and journalists tend to listen to them more than to the other more modest academics. Also, there's just academics communicating sloppily about their own research or referring to other people's research, and not having this intellectual humility that Bojana was talking about. Actually, exaggerating their findings, maybe being too jubilant about potential future discoveries, to the point sometimes of spreading misinformation. One thing that I'm seeing a lot in the area of AI right now is that people are doing, academics too, are predicting a lot, like in 5 years this will happen, in 10 years this might happen. Like, you don't know that. I don't think it's intellectually humble to make these predictions when so many predictions about technology in the past have not come to pass. Anyway, I should hurry up. This is not just an individual thing that people do, but also a structural thing. I recently read about really interesting research by Eike Vonk, who is a PhD researcher in Utrecht. And she says universities are partly to blame for media misinformation as well, because in press releases, they are doing this exact thing of exaggerating, not putting things into context, not maybe asking for a second opinion. And this is sort of to be expected, right? Institutions, universities have to promote their own work, their own researchers. Normally this would be okay, because a journalist would read this press release and be like, well, I'm not so sure about this. I'm going to call someone else who is researching this topic, and this person might say, well, it's not that surprising, or it's not that big of a discovery. And then the system works, right? But she says, Eike Vonk says, journalism is in such a bad shape, often sometimes just copy-pasting press releases, or even taking the most exciting bits out, making it even more sort of one-sided. And she proposes a solution by saying that the press offices at universities should actually do some of the journalism work themselves and sort of pre-filter, maybe even ask for second opinions from other researchers. This is a very painful conclusion to me, because it kind of means that journalism is failing so much that actually people who are often regarded as the opposite of journalism, press officers, now have to carry a bit of the load for us. Let me gather my thoughts. And this is not dissimilar from what we've seen before. We have the rise of science communicators. Academics themselves have become much better at translating their message, their research to the public, also circumventing journalists. So you can see this as a trend, but to conclude that we should cut out the middleman, the journalists, from in between academia and the public, I don't think it's the solution. Because of those problems I described, science can sometimes contradict itself, or researchers veer out of their own expertise. You kind of need someone to maybe go against that a little bit and give an overview, like say, okay, this person is saying this, but the actual scientific consensus is this, and then the public stays well informed about science. And I also think, is a press officer who gets presented with research from their own university saying, for example, we found the strongest evidence of alien life so far, which is a recent example from the University of Cambridge. Will that press officer really call other astronomers, right, not astrologers, other astronomers to ask, hey, is this actually good research? Because a lot of people are saying the Cambridge study is actually really bad, and it's completely exaggerated, and we are not sure at all if life was found on this particular planet. Is the press officer really going to put that in a press release? I don't think you can expect that from them, because it wouldn't be loyal to their own employer, right? And the whole thing of journalism is that it has no interests except the readers, at least in theory, on paper. This is often now going wrong, obviously, but that's the idea. And I don't think we can do without that. And I don't think Eike would, I don't know her, but I don't think she'd disagree with that. 1 minute left, yay. But she says it's just not happening anymore. There's not enough money for good journalism. Journalists don't have the time to do good research. It will be placed upon the shoulders of academics, universities themselves to do this. I think this lets us journalists off the hook too easily. I think there's never an excuse for bad journalism. I think it's better to write 1 good story a day than 3 bad ones. I think journalists, editors-in-chief, publishers should enable their journalists to do good science journalism. And I look upon you all to keep asking that of us, keep saying to journalists, hey, you're reporting on this and this falls into my area of expertise and actually this is incorrect. Oftentimes journalists will want to hear this because they don't want to make errors, they don't want to be corrected publicly. So if you if you do it privately and say, hey, you're this, they will be happy to correct it. Most of them, at least. And secondly, maybe some of that money that is now going to, PR from universities and big institutes, maybe that can be transferred to journalism. Maybe a grant system for good science journalism. I think this. I know you guys are not swimming in money, but there's a new government coming, so maybe the cuts won't be as bad. Let's hope and pray. And I think, because I really think that trust in science in the end can only be upheld and maybe even go up with the help of good science journalism. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Menno. Then on to our last but not least speaker of the day, Anne-Floor Scholvink, who is a senior researcher focusing on public engagement and trust in science. The floor is yours.
Thanks. Great, thank you. Thank you for this invitation of being here. I'll give a short talk. I'll try to keep it brief about science distrust as well. But before I start, I would like to tell you a little bit. I work at the Rathenau Institute, which is a non-academic research institute based in The Hague, studying the societal aspects of science, technology, and innovation, which is very broad. And my research line is, amongst others, trust in science and distrust in science. And yes, I think I wanted to start this talk by asking you whether you're worried about the effects of online fake news. But now, having heard the 2 talks by Bojana and Menno, I think I will just start because they have already kind of answered the question. But we know that a lot of Dutch people are worried about this. They think that there is a lot of misinformation out there, and they also think that it has a lot of effect. So basically, the first chart is about the amount of online fake news, and the second chart is about the effects this would have. And there's growing concern about this in Dutch society. Then we also know that there's a lot of concerns about public mistrust in science, as Menno explained. And often you see that these kind of 2 things, these worries, are linked into a causal relationship. And that's done by many institutions, by the Dutch government. It's done by basically everyone, saying that, I'm sorry, I don't think you would be able to read this highlighted pieces, but for example, in the Times magazine, it said, unless we tackle the misinformation that is at the root of vaccine hesitancy, that's the first one, and then by the WHO, which is also quite a has quite a reputation, you would say. They say mitigating the harm of misinformation, suggesting that misinformation about certain scientific topics causes distrust and causes people's change in behavior, basically deciding not to get their children vaccinated, or also other types of behavioral changes. So basically this works. So basically what people suggest is that there's this causal relationship between encountering misinformation, often social media being the scapegoat, and then saying this is what they believe, and then that's why they start not getting their children vaccinated, not adhering to public health guidelines, changes in contraception methods, which are not very effective. So that's basically what this relationship suggests. And then me being a researcher, you know what my take is going to be. It's a bit more nuanced than this. So basically, what we see is that first of all, if we do a literature study, we see that the amount of exposure to online misinformation is quite contested. How much misinformation do you actually see when you scroll through Facebook, X, TikTok, whatever? That is something that is quite difficult to define, because at first it's difficult to define what is actually misinformation. Is it some information, first, of course, is just plain wrong, but there's lots of information out there which is framed in a certain way, or which is partly true, or we can't really classify it as misinformation. And then what we say is, okay, let's classify it as junk news. But even then, it's quite limited, actually, the amount of misinformation you see on your timelines on average. But of course, social media is not like TV, where everyone sees the same thing if they turn on the TV on the same channel. It's highly personalized. So that means that some people actually see a lot of misinformation. It's very skewed. And then a lot of people don't see any misinformation at all, or very, very little. They do hear about this misinformation through misinformation narratives on mainstream media, which is basically something, for example, Menno investigates the hypes about this information, but they don't see the actual misinformation. So that is already something which is quite hard to say that there's a lot of misinformation out there and you're all bombarded with it. That is a bit of an exaggeration, you could say. Then the next step, encountering it is not by definition the same as believing it, right? A lot of people tend to share misinformation, not because they actually believe it, but actually to say, for satirical reasons, see what's out there, how crazy is this? And then they share it. And then if you would just take sharing and interacting with it as a proxy value, basically, for believing it, then you're misjudging the reasons why people are sharing this information. So that is also, when you delve into it, it's quite hard to say, do people actually believe it if they encounter it? Or are they commenting on it just to tell their friends, how funny is this? So that is the second step, which we can problematize, basically. And then the third step, from believing in this misinformation towards a change in behavior, that is quite difficult to say, because there's quite some methodological issues, which, for the sake of time, I won't go into for now. But that's also something which we can't so easily presume. And then, Bojana has already explained, science skepticism is a very heterogeneous concept. It's different across domains, as Bojana explained, but it's also there's socio-demographic variables which play a role. So some people may believe, they may trust climate change, but science and climate change, but not in vaccines, and that may be dependent on, for example, their psychological distance, as Bojana explained, but it also may depend on other variables. It's a very complex part. And then there's also an issue that lots and lots of this research is being done in the US, which is nice because it has a great cultural influence, of course, on us, but it's not the same. And nationality does play quite a big role in the way we perceive science and the way we perceive media coverage about science. So that makes it quite hard to kind of just say, okay, so it's happening out there, so it will be the same in the Netherlands. That's not the way it works. So basically, I've tried to kind of dissect all these elements of this causal relationship. My main message for now is that it is that it is quite contested, and that whenever you see in media this blame of misinformation on social media, that's the cause of this deterioration in whatever topic, you might think twice and say, well, maybe there's more at play than just this misinformation on social media. And we are working on a empirical study to kind of delve into these factors a little bit more about what then does cause this public distrust. But unfortunately, we're still in the middle of analyzing the data, so that's something for maybe next talk. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm very much looking forward to the discussion with Bojana and Menno as well.
So I would like to invite Menno and Bojana again on the stage. Maybe we can get another chair on the stage as well, because I really want to sit among you guys. Test. Yes, this works. I will share this microphone with Bojana, I think. Well, we saw your presentations, very interesting, and I think you are the people we need for a good discussion on trust in science. Just a heads up for the audience, the last 5 minutes or so we will go to audience questions, so please already think of questions you want to ask the panel. Now's your chance, or of course afterwards during the drinks. First of all, on the floor, I quickly read your LinkedIn. I think you're the longest, you have the longest timeline in this trust in science issue. Start your PhD in 2013, I think. No, but this is then the perfect question for you. Is because trust in science seems very topical today. But has this always been an issue, or is it now a sign of the times, perhaps?
Okay. Yeah, does it work?
Not yet. Come again.
Try again now. Okay.
Your neighbor is.
Okay. Yeah, this doesn't work. Yeah, thanks. To be precise, I didn't start my work on trust in science in 2013. But we at the Rathenau Institute have been studying trust in science since 2012. So I think, yes, I can say a little bit about it. And what Menno and Bojana both correctly said is that trust, when you just look at it from a distance, by national survey, which we also do at the Rathenau, every 3 years or so we have this survey measuring trust, and you see that it's very high and very stable, and it's actually the highest trust in an institution in the Netherlands compared to trust in the government. Well, that's quite low at the moment. Trust in media and in journalists is also declining. Trust in the rechtspraak, the judicial system. That's pretty high, but actually trust in science is even higher. And it's high and stable. But what I think is funny is that since I've been working on this topic now for about 5-6 years, and since then, there's always been kind of a lot of concern about the trust declining, and people thinking, okay, this is it's a very in Dutch you say a broos vertrouwen, so it's I don't know the English word. Fragile, exactly. That it would be a fragile thing, and then so far we actually just find that the trust is quite robust, and across, you know, the big middle, there's just a lot of very reasonable people who trust still science, and it's not as declining as people are afraid of. This, having said this, of course there is groups in society who don't trust specific domains or who don't trust science at all, and that is very interesting to study. But across the whole, it's not. The picture is not as grim as you said. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very.
Yeah. No, you have the dysfunction.
That's in. Okay. Let's go again. Indeed, very interesting. I'm also surprised to hear you say, like, okay, don't worry, trust in science is still high, because we hear some voices, but apparently, if we poll it, it seems differently. But Menno, outside looking in, what's your view on this potential distrust? Do you think it could go somewhere with all this, especially in the journalists? Do you think there is a danger? Do we see a decline perhaps in the future, or will trust always be high?
Well, you can never predict the future. So I tend to shy away from that. What I can say is that sometimes you see a slower effect of current developments having their effects later in the future. For example, when people are now predicting that AI in 5 years will be able to do your dishes, and then it doesn't happen, people will be disappointing and say, hey, the scientists lied to us, I still have my dirty dishes. So we got to be careful with that. Things could work out bad in the long term. I also think that while the number of people trusting or distrusting science or journalism stays more or less the same, you can have these more radicalized factions between among the people who are distrusting. They become more radicalized. They might commit violence or threaten journalists. Threats to journalists and to politicians and to scientists, they are going up. Those numbers are going up. So that's saying something. And also in national politics, you see that distrust and hate, even suspicion, has become more institutionalized, especially on a national level, with parties who are explicitly anti-press governing the country. Well, not anymore, but up until a few weeks ago. So yeah, there is still reason to be worried. It's just not correct to say, oh, there's this steep decline in science, and then it's very tempting to obviously connect that to other things we see happening, like social media, and say, okay, 1 and 1 is 2, that must be the reason. But as on the floor says, it's nuanced.
Yeah, and I also would like to add, because we're now kind of in the frame, I mean, in this discussion and also in all our talks, we are in this frame of high trust being a good thing by definition, and that is something I would also like to question, because, I mean, there is this kind of healthy amount of skepticism. I mean, science in itself is organized skepticism, you could say. So I think that having just a skeptical view of science is perfectly fine, up until this point of radicalization, of course, and this whole point of violence is of course something we should never even reach close to. But a certain amount of science distrust, I think, is perfectly healthy for a society.
Can I add to that just a short thought? I think it's most important that we learn people how to distinguish between good and bad science, between good and bad journalism. Maybe don't teach them distrust, but yes, as you say, skepticism and media and science literacy.
Well, that's actually a very interesting topic, and I also wanted to go a little bit further into that. But maybe to Bojana then. Menno said we have to teach people how to be more knowledgeable about science, how to improve science literacy. But science also becomes, in my view, more and more of an expertise. We're going deeper and deeper now with AI, a hype word perhaps, but it's becoming a sort of a black box, even for scientists looking over to very close fields. Do we expect then the general public to be able to peer through all this expertise and all these hard things?
Yeah, that's a big topic. I think it's not really... Is this working? Yeah. It's not really realistic to expect from people to engage so deeply with every fact that or piece of information that they encounter. Is just not viable. And that's why we need good journalists to filter the information through. I think also I keep going back to that data point, but I really think it's very illustrative that 90% of people say they trust science, but 30 to 45% of the same people say I only trust science that aligns with my personal beliefs. So this is not the part of science skepticism that we are going to tackle by making people more knowledgeable per se. I think maybe being exposed to science and engaging with science through learning as well can have positive impacts through just being close to science and seeing how it works and adopting and picking up some of the values that we try to foster in science. But I don't think that just, I think you would agree probably that just more science literacy and expecting people to vet every piece of information is gonna work.
Yeah, and I think also in light of this evening and open science being celebrated here tonight, I was wondering, because you're studying psychological distance, and one of your takeaways was how to change this psychological distance is in science communication, having these tweaks of bringing the science basically closer to people. And I was wondering whether you also could take that a step further and say public engagement with science being part of the open science framework, basically, that would maybe be even a step even further into bridging this gap and taking and bringing science and science closer to the public and public closer to science. So whether that would be a next step.
Yeah, I definitely think that trying to find spaces and opportunities where we can really bridge this distance sort of in real life is the way to go. The problem is that you often in trying to engage the public end up preaching to the choir, which is another set of problems, and that doesn't mean we shouldn't engage with the public, but I think with the people that it would maybe be most effective, it's extremely difficult to reach them. I think,
You have to start at a young age, right? If you want to do that,
yeah.
Because from a certain point, it's very hard to change people's beliefs and ideas. And if you teach kids at a young age about certain, you don't have to go very in depth, but you could learn them. Okay, you read something about research done on topic X, and 10 people were interviewed, and for another study, 100 people were interviewed. Well, which one is more reliable? It's a very obvious. It may sound very obvious, but this is where it's often going wrong. Studies get cited in the media, and they actually just have 10 respondents. These things literally happen. Recently, a story about the amount of kids who vape, like e-cigarettes, And it was widely reported that 40% of 12 to 16-year-olds vape regularly, which is ridiculous. If you think about it, that can never be true. And actually 8 kids answered this question in the study. But this is something that may have been left out of the press release, or may have been left out by journalists, or it's overlooked. Whatever the reason, but you want people to know that it's very important how many people were asked about this, so maybe they will look it up, or maybe they will at least check the article for the amount of responses, and maybe when they can find it, they think, oh, well, I don't know how many people were in this study, so maybe I shouldn't take it too seriously.
Yeah, so indeed, teaching people at a young age how to vet through these news articles and scientific articles is a good thing. But also with the age of social media, also in my timelines, I see a lot of information that I think, oh, interesting, and then I look it up, and it's like nothing of that is actually true. But also sometimes I just scroll through and think, that was interesting, and then I even tell some people about it. In this age of the amount of information that's huge, would not also be a step trying to raise the quality of this news, or and how do we do that? Indeed, do we have to talk to the journalists? Do we have to become better communicators? How to prevent basically the information spreading, or the misalignment of our research results and what's put out there? Maybe for the entire panel.
All of the above?
Yeah, I think.
Yeah.
I think it's super challenging how you touched on that a bit. How fragmented the information space is. Therefore, trying to maybe standardize or raise the bars in one domain is like you're still going to miss out on a lot of personalized content that might be the most harmful. So I think also in relation to what we heard in your talks, that misinformation is not like the main culprit and the main cause. Like I tend to agree with the fact, but I also think it's it's a little bit more nuanced. I don't think it's either like completely not a problem at all, or which is not what you said, I know, but nor do I think it's like the main causal sort of like factor, but because of all of the all of ours, including people in this room, motivations that we want to, I don't know, just have the same opinions as our in-group, for example, or conform to the majority opinion, or some information for whatever reason is unpleasant, right? We're going to have all of these biases, and misinformation kind of is catering to that demand that is there because of how our cognition, how we work as human beings. Therefore, I think it's more of this interaction, and also the misinformation online, it might not be so widespread, but it finds its way in the mainstream, which is, I think the cumulative effect becomes visible.
And if you're talking about measures how to kind of limit this, what I think, as I interpret your question, a big shout out to journalists like Menno, and I think Eike Vonk, was her name, a suggestion of having press officers at universities, taking on this job. I think it's to be honest quite naive, because they simply have a different incentive. They don't have an incentive of being a good journalist. They have an incentive of selling their researchers' work, and it's great, and they're doing a great job. So I think yes, it's still the journalists' responsibility to vet this.
That was my like paraphrasing of what she's saying. So don't be too mad at her. Maybe she was a little bit more nuanced than how I said it, and then I would be to blame. But just to go into the point that Bojana says, when misinformation becomes a mainstream, I think that's where it becomes very dangerous. As journalists and academics, we cannot be expected to solve the problem of misleading narratives, misinformation, full untruths, half untruth. That will always be there. There's a demand for it, and there is no easy solution for that. The only thing that we can do is try to keep our own disciplines as clean as possible. How do you say it? Zuiver, as proper as possible. To be as journalists, as scientists, to be the place where people can find the reliable information if they want to. And don't get sucked in by hype, don't get sucked in by the temptation of exaggerating things to get more attention, to get more funding. And that's already difficult enough. So don't worry about all the rest, just let's do our own jobs very well, and then in the long run we'll be sort of okay, I think.
Will be sort of okay. That's very well put
That's
by all three of you. We have a couple of minutes left for audience questions. So if anybody has a question, please raise your hand, and Bogdana will come over.
So, hi. You're the perfect group of people to ask this, so I'm very happy you're together. A few weeks ago, we got asked to share some research through our channels from the university itself. And the research was roughly, it was something like drinking coffee is good for you, but it was also very obvious that it was paid for by big coffee manufacturers. The science was sound, but we still felt like, I don't know if this hurts, let's say, reputation of science, or really helps it. How do you feel about that?
Who's the we in this?
The VU in this case.
Are you at the press office, or are you a researcher?
No. So I'm part of the university library, and we got this from the press office. And also don't want to blow this up for the VU, but so we had a very interesting discussions in, will this help the VU, or because it felt a bit like, yes, drinking coffee is good, and the science showed it, but at the same time, the people... But you
were worried because of the payment construction.
Exactly, the people that paid for it, obviously...
One of my previous research projects, which I didn't tell you about now, was about science being paid for by government, so it was not company paid research, but similar. And we did focus groups with people talking about, okay, so when do you trust science, under what conditions, and then going step by step further when it's being paid for by the government, and then when the government actually starts interfering with it, and then what can they do and what can't they do. And people are very, very, how to say... allergic to involvement by people who pay for it, basically, and they are very keen on like who pays for this, and then do I trust it? So I think maybe in the short run you can have a good media coverage about your research, but when it gets picked up that this research was being paid for by a company, then I would say it hurts in the long run.
I think it also depends on how transparent you are about it. I think that's a basic necessity, is to be transparent and honest about it. Like, don't shove it under the carpet. What I would say is, if these researchers can in good conscience say, we were not influenced by the money, by the coffee company, we would have done this research anyway, there is no effect at all, like it happened as if it happened in a complete vacuum, then just put it out to the world and say, our conscience is clean because so and so and so. If you can't answer these questions in good conscience, then maybe that's the problem, and not the question whether to write a press release about it or not.
Well, I hope that that helps you out a bit. Any other questions? Yes.
I have a hypothetical question. So what if the things that we want are in conflict with each other? So I don't have the evidence for this, but anecdotally, you could say that scientists that become famous become less well in their scientific humility. And at some point, there is the Nobel disease, there is the Trump inner circle of vaccine scientists, and they don't take any criticism anymore. They never reflect anymore on things they've said wrong in the past. So anecdotally, let's assume now that that is actually, that we can establish that as a causal relationship of fame making scientists less well behaved in terms of scientific humility. So on the one hand, we want closeness, psychological closeness to science, and we want maybe also in the movement of recognition rewards, we want scientists to communicate to the public. And on the other hand, we might have this, hypothetically, very bad effect of fame. What would your response be to such a conflict of things that we want?
Yeah, maybe I can start. Like, I think this is, maybe obvious, but I think it's that what you're describing. I think we can all, or at least I can recognize like some, instances where I thought, oh, this is happening. This person is not really receptive to criticism anymore, or to the extent they should be. But I think the problem is their structural, like how science is valued, and this model of the star scientist, right, that is alone doing all of these great things. And I think it's like a slow process of changing the norms in science, which is exactly what the movement you mentioned is trying to do. So I would say the problem there is really the structural incentives that scientists have to publish and to push their idea.
Maybe a short answer, because we have to move on, unfortunately, but maybe keep it short.
I'll try to keep it short. I would say being famous and closeness to science can be two completely different things, because you don't need to be famous to be close to people, right?
You're close to more people if you're famous.
Or if you engage directly with publics in public engagement projects in citizen science, then you don't need to be famous. Try to keep it brief.
One more remark about this. I think this is mostly the media at fault for making these sort of star scientists. You can't blame scientists for being charismatic and being media savvy. I think that's only good. But it's the role of the media to sort of keep them in check. And after 100 interviews, maybe not interview Richard Dawkins or Steven Pinker again, but choose someone else, who is actually a bit more humble and maybe also very interesting, and make them seem interesting. I think that's definitely the journalist's job.
Well, I'd like to thank you all for being very interesting and having this panel discussion with us. On to the Oscar Awards, but not before we have another applause for these fantastic speakers.
Hello? Ah, yeah, perfect. Nice. Now we're changing the theme. We're going to go to the main event of today, which is the OSCAWARDS ceremony. In the panel discussion, we also heard the role of open science practices, especially transparency and intellectual humility, that can help combat misinformation and also increase the trust in science. And now we want to celebrate all the open science initiatives in our institutes. So before we begin, I will give you just an overview of the applications this year. We received 35 outstanding projects. That's around the same number as we did last year, and we're really happy about that. We received applications from all our 4 OSCA institutions and also the partner organizations. The 3 universities had 10 submissions. The University of Amsterdam had 15 submissions. The University of Applied Sciences 3, and the Amsterdam University Medical Center 6. And also one of our partners, the eScience Center, also had a submission. So I spread it out like that because last year the Free University had more applications than the UFA, and this year it's the other way around. So me as a UFA researcher is really happy about that. So we also, what I'm really happy about is the high variety of disciplines. So it ranged from medical science, language and communication science, political science, economics, psychology, neuroscience, research integrity, urban mobility, urban planning, environmental justice. So really we have a big variety and diversity in the topics, and also a lot of different backgrounds. So we as the open science community, we don't only want to engage researchers, but we want to also educate educators and librarians, and we see from the submissions that we are also reaching those communities. And also the level of seniority varied a lot. So we had around 23% student submissions, and that was one of our main goals this year, to increase the student engagement, and we achieved that, and we're really happy about it. And also really nice with our 4 categories that are going to be awarded this year. There's more or less an equal spread, so this is also really good news. So that was all about the statistics and a little overview. So now we're going to head on to the actual award ceremony and the OSCAWARDS 2025 winners. So I think our first category actually fits in very nicely to the panel discussion, because it's about stakeholder involvement, citizen science, and community engagement. And we have as our first winner of today the Transdisciplinary Global Health Challenge by Manon Gerber and her team. So an applause for her.
Hi, my name is Amber, and I'm here on behalf of my team, also with Jeroen. And together we worked on the Transdisciplinary Global Health Challenge. So we are from the VU, Amsterdam, and we redesigned twice our Global Health minor program to embed a strong community engagement project with students, which we call the Transdisciplinary Global Health Challenge. So it's a 5-month-long project in which students work with local and global community partners on a real-life health challenge. And some key elements of the program are this transdisciplinary collaboration. So we had students from different disciplines, nationalities, and cultures work together with local and global partners. And another important element is the focus on social justice and inclusive engagement. So we focused on social justice projects that focused on systemic inequities by collaborating with different types of partners that all worked on social justice in one way or another. So we worked, for example, with a local organization in Amsterdam working on healthcare access for undocumented migrants. We worked with the Regenbooggroep on the well-being of homeless people in Amsterdam. But we also worked with a partner last year in India on disability issues in India and the Netherlands. And we have two big open science values that I think are integrated well in this program, and that is, of course, open engagement with societal stakeholders, but also the sharing of knowledge, so knowledge integration with the university and outside of the university, and then sharing this in open platforms. So we did this by using the Open Research Platform, in which we're showcasing the work that we did over the past 3 years. And both values are really important for tackling these complex global health issues, and that's what we wanted to teach our students.
Over there.
On the stage. Yes. You don't do you want to?
Yay. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's here. Our second winner of this category is from Saskia Esanhashi and her team, and it's about joy in academia. So congratulations to them.
Hi everyone, thank you for everyone for awarding us this award. I'm happy to accept it on behalf of the Joy in Academia team. We're with the 5 of us in the book outlet. It said that we were the 2 of us, but we were with an entire team with Onar Shaheen, Dunya Bourabain, Daudi van Veen and Zahra Cholak. And we have made a podcast which for us feels more than like an interdisciplinary podcast or like a series of conversations. It has been such an inspiring process and healing process, as it was a podcast made by racialized academics for racialized academics, and it's rooted in care, in community, and imagination for envisioning different academic futures for ourselves and others within academia. And we center the voices of racialized academics in the Dutch universities and Belgian universities, not necessarily to document their pain of exclusion and being underrepresented and not feeling like they are belonging, like they belong, but actually to listen to how they are creating space for themselves and others, how they are flourishing and how they find joy. And for us, joy is not some sort of escape from this exclusion or the racism that they experience, but a radical and relational practice. It's a quiet form of resistance, a refusal to be diminished, and a way of dreaming forward. Through 10 in-depth interviews, we bring to the center the racialized stories, knowledge, experiences that live in the margins of the university, yet have crucial power and vision for how we can be in academia differently. Joy in Academia is for us a platform of visibility and connection, and it's openly accessible on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, which I highly recommend very objectively. We redefine open science by making underrepresented knowledge co-created, accessible, and community-rooted. And we are challenging in this podcast who can produce knowledge, what knowledge is for, and what knowledge can do for us. And since our launch in March 2024, we have gathered racialized academics across institutions, turning spaces of exclusion into spaces of joy, resistance, and care. And we just checked, but we have almost 400 followers in 34 countries, and we are building a growing community across borders and disciplines. And finally, I just want to give back that Joy in Academia dares to ask the question, what if joy were central to how we understand knowledge? And what if care and collectivity were the foundation of the academy? And in this imagination and questioning, We are moving from survival to flourishing, from silence to voice, and from isolation to belonging.
You can also bring the whole team upstairs. Thank you so much. We're now moving on to our next category, which is transparency, meta-science, pre-registration, and reproducibility. And our first winner of this category is Julius Pfad and his team for the project Trends in Empirical Research and Psychology, a systematic review using human coders and a large language model. Congratulations.
Hi, I'm Julius Pfad. I'm a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Amsterdam, and I'm very happy to receive this award, also on behalf of my 44 collaborators. I'm now going to try to summarize the project in under 2 minutes. Let's go. Oh. Okay. So in this project, we systematically reviewed the data analysis practices in the field of psychology. And for this purpose, we first identified the 6 leading psychological journals that publish empirical research. And we identified 16,000 articles, empirical articles, that were published in the last 20 years. Out of these 16,000, half we had reviewed by humans, and the other half we are going to have reviewed by a large language model, in that case ChatGPT's O4 mini model. We are interested in the prevalence of certain data analysis practices, and the most important one in terms of open science are probably data sharing and pre-registration. But on top of that, we also looked into how people use Bayesian analysis, the type and focus of the analysis they use, and the software for the data analysis. We plan to combine all these results into one openly accessible database that has these 16,000 articles, the metadata, and the results from this project. I'm very happy that I can already show you some preliminary results, because these are all the articles coded by humans. And we see here the uptake of open science practices in the field of psychology in the last 20 years. And at the bottom panel, we see that data sharing has actually seen a huge increase in the last maybe 10 years, up to over 60%. And pre-registration is maybe at about 40% by now. So I think this speaks to the success of the open science community in terms of pushing researchers to embrace open science principles, but it also speaks to the work we can all still put in to get these numbers maybe up to closer to 100. Thank you, and thank you again for the award.
Now we come to our second winner of this category, and this award goes to Gerben Terriet for his project on the adherence to the Urban Vitality Open Science Checklist. Congratulations.
Thank you. Gerben couldn't be here or had to leave early, so My name is Anna. I'm here. Yeah. So, slide. So what we did is we introduced this open science checklist around 6 years ago in our faculty, the Faculty of Health in the Amsterdam University of Applied Sciences. And we were curious now, almost 6 years later, about the adherence of the checklist by our researchers. So what we did is we selected 24 projects, research projects in our faculty, and we did a desk research. We looked at their output. Do they have a data management plan, for example, or reporting guidelines, or one of the other 14? And not only did we do a desk research, but we also did interviews of about an hour, and we just followed the checklist and asked about the adherence to these checks. Yeah, with that, we scored the results with ones and zeros. Yes, had a data management plan 1, or no, 0, and for all the other checks as well. Some checks were not, steps were not applicable, and the results I realize now I should have added a result slide, but we also scored partially because with a data management plan, for example, it's quite easy to have a 0 or 1, but for justification, for example, how do you justify your research being done? It's quite hard to say yes or no. So we also did a partially analysis. And with that, we saw 4 results. We saw high and staying high. So, what I forgot to mention is that we checked it over 4 years, so from 2020 to 2023. And with that, we can see the changes in adherence on every step. So, for example, a data management plan, again, it starts high and staying high, so the adherence is high, and this is mainly because of the what is it, the subsidieverstrekkers, was that in English? The funders, thank you, demand this data management plan, for example. We also see a low adherence and staying low, which is not well, obviously, so we have some work to do there. And next to that, we are trying to do, or want to do, a qualitative analysis of the interviews, because it had lots of information, very interesting. And with that, we want to go back to the researchers for a dialogue. We're not sure yet how to do all this, so this is also a question for you. So if you have any tips for us to start this dialogue with all this information and with these results, please come up to me at the drinks. And yeah, that's it for now. Thanks very much. Thank you.
Great, we come to our third category of the evening, which is open access, open data, open materials, and open software. So our first winner of this category is Judith Schröere for her project All in Meta BCG Corona. Congratulations.
Thanks very much for the award. So this is a project, open science and collaboration in clinical trial research. I will talk about the success part. So if you want to know about the failure part, please ask me over drinks. I actually do want to talk about the failure part, and that was the reason I nominated it. To look back on it, and this was quite unique because it started in the COVID pandemic. In a situation where science was under pressure, and in which we had many clinical trials actually asking the same question. And in this project, it was 10 to 20 trials, all asking the question, can we already protect our healthcare workers with a vaccine that we already have stashed away, so one that we already have. So we started researching that, and for me, as a statistician, I initiated the collaboration because it was interesting to analyze these clinical trials together and see if we, over time, can find a conclusion early. But it was also logistically very challenging with so many people. And we had to only invite 2 people per trial in all our consensus discussions and only 2 people per trial authors on the paper. But you have so many people involved in clinical trial research. So we thought of the platform Research Equals to publish modules underlying this project, authored by different people and also citing each other, so we could also give credit to all the other people that might not end up on the paper. And for me, as a statistician looking back on this, what still keeps me going researching this type of work is that even in this very unique circumstances of a pandemic, clinical trial researchers were quite unwilling to give external control to some outsider, a statistician in the Netherlands, over what was happening in their clinical trial, over stopping rules within their trial, even if that would be have a decision early. And so I realized that the approach that I'm working on as a statistician, the all-in approach, is pretty unique in that it doesn't enforce that. It doesn't enforce any outside control, and that is something that is really worth it to keep collaboration going. So, thank you very much.
Our second winner of this category is Matthias Now for his project Open MRI, camera-free magnetic resonance-based eye tracking for research and clinical application. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for this award. First of all, it's a privilege to be here, and congrats to all the other prize winners. Yeah, so I'm going to present deep MRI, open MRI. Deep MRI is part of it. So first of all, eye movements are a powerful readout of human cognition and also an important biomarker for many diseases, for example, Parkinson's disease. Yet when we look at brain imaging, actually it's rarely combined with brain imaging tools, for example, fMRI as the main driver of brain imaging. And so why is that? So one of the reasons is that MR-compatible eye trackers are really expensive, so they cost 50,000 euros or upwards, and they require cumbersome setups and trained staff to be used. And so is there maybe an alternative? So first of all, the slides are a little bit different, I guess. But so the point is that if you look at this GIF here, you see your eyes move. That's all of you right now looking at this slide. And so we thought instead of using a really expensive camera, we could just use the MRI signal directly. So actually infer from the MRI signal directly the state of the eyeballs and where they are pointing at the screen. And so open MRI is really a whole ecosystem of computational tools that achieves this. So you can do eye tracking with MRI data. And the important thing is that this works post hoc, so you can use it in existing data. You do not need a camera, so you save a lot of money and time. You can use it, for example, for eyes closed eye tracking, for example, during sleep. You can use it for patient groups that were previously unavailable, essentially for many research topics. For example, congenitally blind participants, you cannot really calibrate a camera for them. So our computational tools you can use on all of those patient groups too. And I just want to say that this is all open source, of course, open code and data. It comes with an extensive documentation. And yeah, thank you so much. It's a long line.
we come to our fourth category, which is open educational resources, open education, and open online courses. The first winner of this award is Barbara Leitner and her team for the project Empowering Early Career Researchers to Enhance Responsible Research Practices and Research Culture. So I believe, as I understand it, that her team is not here today. I did prepare a little summary of her project. I saw Barbara speak at a previous Open Science event, which was really inspiring. So I'm just going to briefly explain to you what her project was about. So the idea of the project is that early career researchers often underestimate their potential to influence the research culture around them. And to help change that, the project leaders developed a set of educational workshops which is specifically designed to empower early career researchers to recognize and embrace their role in fostering responsible research practices. So the workshop itself uses 4 short videos to spark discussion, and it's about real dilemmas early career researchers face. So that includes dealing with incapable supervisors, but also managing collaborations, conflicts of interest, and also taking initiative. So then participants are encouraged to reflect and consider different ways to respond to each situation and to find the most empowering course of action for them. And by that, the team leaders hope to enhance the research culture by means of discussing and promoting research integrity and the equity of early career researchers. Then I have a little information about the project lead, Barbara Leitner. She's a psychologist by training, and she's currently a research associate in ethics law and medical humanities at the Amsterdam University Medical Center. And even if she cannot be here today, I think we can still clap for the project because it sounds great. So our second winner in this category is Johnny van Doren for his project on open statistics education with JASP. Congratulations.
All right, hi. I brought proof of my project. Yeah, so we need a clicker. Yeah, it's very cool to be here at this event. I didn't send the slide. Well, I can freestyle it. So I've been working on JASP for the past about 10 years together with some of my colleagues that are also here, EJ and Henrik and Alex. JASP is an open source statistics software that if you don't know it and you ever do statistics, I can very highly invite you to check it out. It's very intuitive to use, and most importantly, it's open source and freely accessible wherever you are, whenever you want to do statistics. We did notice that just developing this cool software is not enough for complete world domination. So in the past years, we've been working on various educational materials to help educators adapt JASP in their statistics education. One of these is this book that we worked very hard on in the past year. Unfortunately, this book is not open source because it's written by the rock star in the field in social science statistics, Andy Field. And so that's just a regular book. But we did convert his book that was initially written for a closed source statistics software. We converted his book so that it works with JASP, so to help people adapt it in their education. I also had 2 other projects that were on the slide. We have a openly accessible data library with a lot of data sets for teaching purposes or just practice purposes. We have a open source Bayesian statistics course book that I have a baby version and EJ has a grown-up version of. And also the website that corresponds to this book is full of openly available educational materials like practice data sets, exam questions, real-world data examples. So all sorts of stuff to feast on. So yeah, thanks. And I will leave this here if any of the following winners want to take this home with them as an additional prize. Feel free to take this.
Thank you so much. So these were our 4 main categories, but we also would like to encourage the Open Science Initiative led by students. So we have 2 additional student awards. And the first winner of this category is Nina Leonie Ehmann, who's represented today by Erik Jan Wagenmakers for her project launching a Diamond Open Access Journal to promote robust science. Congratulations.
Thank you very much for the award. I know that Nina is really excited about it. And so what Nina helped do is to set up a new journal, a Diamond Open Access Journal, the Journal of Robustness Reports. And it is because if you read an empirical article in almost any discipline, what you usually see is you see only a single analysis that was done by a single analysis team. And effectively, what you're doing in that case, you're looking at the tip of an iceberg of uncertainty. But underneath the waterline, there's all the uncertainty associated with other possible and plausible analyses that could have been done but weren't. So the usual way to solve this dilemma is to do many analyst projects where other teams take the same data and try to answer the same research question but with a different methodology. So this is really useful, but it's also very effortful. And the Journal of Robustness Reports is an attempt to make this process more efficient. So in particular, when you submit a robustness report to the journal, it can only be 500 words, so really short. So the data that you analyze obviously have to be openly accessible, and this is a way for us that we hope that these type of analyses will become mainstream, and we also hope to convince regular journals to adopt this format. So I hope that with Nina's efforts, in the future, it will be possible to judge the claims of empirical articles not just by looking at the tip of the iceberg, but actually looking at the complete iceberg. Thank you very much.